Yesterday we got some bad news, and it looks like we have to stay stationary in our RV for much longer than expected. You know, there's a couple reasons why you might be stationary in your RV. Sometimes it's intentional. Let's say you're a snowbird and it's just cheaper to keep an RV down south and live in a sticks and bricks up north. That's really, really common.
Right.
But then also sometimes life happens.
Now, we spent our first year trying to adjust and find our sweet spot for travel, right? 1 to 2 weeks wasn't a long enough time in one location. We found that our sweet spot was about 3 weeks, right? You go into a camping location, you set your stuff up, you go out and you enjoy that entire area, and then you move on. One of the nice things about moving a lot is that whenever you move your RV to a new location, it's like exploring, right? You go into a brand new place that you've never gone before, and it's exciting. When you sit in one location for too long, you've got to beware of getting depressed, feeling a little bit hopeless, right? Mercedes and I start blaming each other.
Well, because you're stuck with the other person, and that's all you're looking at, and it's like, oh, so you got to be really careful.
Yeah, so by the end of our 2-month stay in Yosemite, we were on each other's nerves. Now, at this point, we've been here 3 months. We've been to, 11 or 12 doctor's appointments. We assumed that once we got here that we would take care of all that stuff and get Sage the help that she needed and then move on, and that's just not the news that we got. It ended up being a lot worse than we suspected.
Yeah, and by all means, we know that everything could always be worse. It's just that this is really raw for us because we just got the news yesterday, and so we're uncertain how long we have to be stationary for. So we're going to go into details about that later, but we've had this happen before where we've had an unexpected thing happen and all of a sudden we're stationary in our RV. And so we figured that we would share our stationary RVing tips, not just to prepare you guys for when it happens, but also to kind of remind ourselves of the silver lining of this situation.
And we're always screaming at the top of our lungs that everybody should have a really solid plan when you RV. The better plan you have, the more smooth it goes. But guys, this is life, right? It's up and down, and we're certainly not victims here. And so you can do all the planning you want, but if things happen that you just don't expect, and you've got to be able, open, and willing to adjust your plan for the circumstances that you have, not as you wish they would be.
You get used to traveling to all these gorgeous places and then you're stuck in one place, and it really takes a lot more work, I think, to continue to find that sense of adventure and newness when you know that your circumstances aren't changing.
We certainly didn't sell all of our belongings, buy an RV, and think that we were going to be sitting in one spot for a long period of time, and that's exactly what we're looking at. You know, we did all this planning. The same thing kind of happened to us last year in Yosemite, where we had our plans booked out 4 months with our 1,000 Trails membership, and it was going great until a family of birds built a nest in the back of our RV, and we were stuck there. Had we left, we were looking at a $15,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. So we got a taste of what it's like when your plans get blown up last year. And you know, it was tough going through that, but because of those birds, they truly were a blessing.
Well, and not just that, but we also learned how to navigate that because it's a completely different type of RV living when you're stationary versus when you're traveling. Here are our 7 stationary tips. So tip number 1, level up.
So the first tip I would give anyone that is moving into a camping location, a resort, campground for a long period of time is to really take a good look at the spot. Walk that spot, obviously find out where all your sewer is, your water is, your electric, and you want to position your RV in the right location so that you can use as much of that spot as you possibly can. But it's always a good idea to use more blocks when you're going to be there for longer periods of time. The other thing that we use is a tripod on our 5th wheel hitch in the front end. It just kind of takes a little bit of that sway and movement out of the RV. We also use X-chocks on our tires. You're just making your RV have a ton of stabilization so that there's not a lot of movement when you're living in your RV.
Number 2, don't stop exploring. Never stop exploring.
You gotta constantly move, guys, and don't get stuck in the RV for long periods of time.
And so this can take on different forms, but how many of you, I bet this applies to many of you right now, where you live pretty close to something absolutely amazing,
Right.
but you don't visit it.
You take it for granted.
Exactly. Take advantage of all the treasures that are local. We're blessed enough to live in a country that takes care of its natural resources. How about we go explore them? We don't have to wait for the RV to suddenly appreciate the outdoors.
We have to stay busy because we're going to be stuck here a lot longer than we ever imagined we would be.
Tip number 3, and this is a controversial one, is cover your tires.
Right. Tire covers is a weird one because some people say you have to have them and some people say that they don't matter. And we've talked to both sets of people. You may want to think about ordering tire protection to cover those tires when you're sitting for a long period of time.
Yeah, and let us know where you stand in the comments. I'm sure there's going to be like, cover your tires, Johnny. And some people are going to be like, it doesn't matter. So it'll be interesting to see who falls where. Tip number 4 is dealing with judgment. And this is just a forewarning that it's going to happen.
Yep.
So there's a couple different kinds of judgment. You might have family that's like, what's the point in being in an RV if you're not going to drive around?
Exactly. And we had never planned on sitting in one spot, both in Yosemite for 2 months and now here it looks like possibly 6 months or even a year. So we're a little freaked out too. Why did you buy an RV and move into an RV park? That's how you want to live? No, we bought the RV for freedom, independence, and adventure. We wanted to go out and see as much of this beautiful country as we possibly could.
Yeah, and the other type of judgment, and this is the one that I think I'm really struggling with, is the self-judgment. Like, I thought that this was going to look a certain way. Your own judgment about the expectations of what you think RV life should look like, and then when it all of a sudden looks stationary, navigating that one.
It's one thing for people outside to be judgmental. Well, you've got to be super careful is when you start getting judgmental of each other. The longer you stay in one location in an RV, the smaller that RV starts to feel. You start to second guess, what the heck are we doing out here with this? The truth is there is going to be some stress between me and Mercedes, and she's going to blame me, and I'm going to blame her. When I start feeling bad about myself, I look for somebody to blame, and I think you do the same thing, right? So, no, she doesn't do that, but I know that I do that. But the judgment, just trust in the process. We chose this lifestyle. There's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be ups and downs. Some days we're not going to be as happy that we live this lifestyle as others, but we still think we made the right decision.
Number 5 is expand into the outdoor space. You're already going to be there. Make it habitable so it doesn't feel so small. You can enjoy the outdoor space equally to the inside space.
It's kind of pride of ownership, right? We went ahead and set up our picnic table, ground carpets out there. We set up 2 recliners, 2 chaise lounge recliners, 2 seats, and then 2 seats for Sage. We also set up the clamshell tent. Get a campfire pit, and if you can't do a campfire or they don't allow wood, go ahead and buy what we bought was a fire bowl, which is a propane fire. Believe me, guys, it's not as good as a real fireplace, but it's close to as good. We really enjoy our time outside.
It doesn't really matter what you're doing outside. Sometimes just sitting outside, it just feels good, even if it's just 15 minutes. Just get out.
Yeah, so take the time and set your place up. If you know you're going to be there for a while, make it your place. It's different than when you get to a place and you think you're going to be there only a week. Obviously, you're not going to dig in too much. Number 6, and what we think is the most important when you're staying long-term, not only just long-term, but any time, is having a positive routine. This was something that Mercedes and I both struggled with a lot when we started. It's a complete shock to your lifestyle when you jump into this lifestyle, and it takes some getting used to. One of the things that we did when we got to this park was we grabbed a schedule of all the activities. Now, believe it or not, there's a lot of activities that go on. Not only that, they do live outdoor shows. One of the worst things you can do is sit down on the couch and start turning on the boob tube and watching TV, right?
When you are all of a sudden stationary, you're going to start to create habits. It's going to be easier because the travel days are no longer part of your schedule. You can equally create negative habits as positive habits. So if you're aware of that, you can be on the lookout. If you're staying at a place with a pool, how awesome is that? Get to the pool. That's what you're paying for, you know? Take advantage of stationary RV living as a time to really cement positive habits.
One of the best things you can do is find a local church. You can actually build fellowship with a bunch of friends.
All right, so before we get into the detail of exactly what's going on, number 7 is clutter. Clutter is so dangerous when you're moving, let alone when you're stationary. When you're stationary, Clutter is so evil and it's sneaky.
Right, and Mercedes and I don't cause a lot of clutter, but we have a 4-year-old who loves to play with 15 different toys at the same time. So we are constantly picking up during the day so that it doesn't feel like we're walking through a minefield. The clutter will drive me absolutely insane. I'll start feeling a little depressed when the place is too cluttered.
All right, so now we're going to talk about what's going on. And it's difficult to navigate, but we just need to be honest with the RV Odd Squad so you guys know kind of what we're dealing with right now.
So as most of you know, Mercedes and I made a decision to spend 4 months in Florida over the winter because this is where Sage's pediatrician is. And before we had left on our trip, there was some concern with her pediatrician that there may be autism. And so we had worked with her the entire time we were gone. Now we had had appointments already set up for Sage when we got back to Florida, and we just had one of those appointments yesterday. It was almost 4 months to get this appointment. I guess there's not a lot of kids in Florida, but we went to this appointment and we got some really bad news.
So we do the intake just yesterday, and it was really difficult to see how things weren't progressing, and the feedback that we got after the intake, frankly, it was just devastating. I really thought that we were going to come here in 4 months and have the appointments we needed to have,
get her the help that she needed,
and we would be on our merry way, and maybe we would have to do things differently, but that was fine. And the reality is it takes so long just to find out anything, and basically what they told us yesterday was that she needs at least 6 months of therapy. It could even be a year, and they're not even sure when they can start the therapy because some of their offices have a wait list.
And yesterday when we got there, we finally got this appointment, and I sat on the other side of, one of those see-through glass panels where Sage and Mercedes were in the room and they were running the tests on Sage. It ended up turning it out to be a lot more serious than Mercedes and I ever could have imagined it would have been.
I didn't realize how extensive the need was until I saw the performance in those tests. And it's just so hard because it's so raw. And I feel like, I failed her. Like, this is something that I caused, or like it could have been avoided. And the doctor actually said that the RVing is beneficial because having her in a more quiet environment has its good sides to it too, because we also have a lot of energy. What is it called? She's also hyperactive, so
and ADHD.
Yeah, so participating in a typical school environment wouldn't be doable. But it's just so hard because it's like you think you're gonna get an answer and you don't. All it does is raise more questions. So now we know what we need, but we don't even know when we can start getting what we need. And it was just one of those things that takes everything that you have planned. I mean, we were literally going in a trip planner looking at Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon and all of these things, and it's like, no, not gonna happen. And that's fine. I mean, obviously we're gonna do whatever we need to do for our kid, and that comes first. There's so many emotions. I'm grateful that this situation isn't worse, because I know that this could be so much worse. And
right.
So I'm trying to have that perspective of like
how blessed we really are.
And we were just talking about how there was so much we still had to do in Florida that we hadn't gotten around to it. This is an opportunity to really get a solid plan on the homeschooling. This is like, I gotta look at the good things about this, that this is gonna make us better,
Right, and we were told that the homeschooling is gonna be great. The homeschooling is gonna be really good for Sage. And the news that we got yesterday was pretty devastating. Now, of course, Sage is the most important thing in our lives, and we're gonna do whatever we have to do to take care of her. But it was like getting a big kick in the gut, because when I stood behind that mirror and I watched the testing that went on with her, and I saw how angry Mercedes was getting because Mercedes thought the lady wasn't doing the test correctly. This woman's been doing this for 25 years, and I was on the outside of the mirror crying, and Mercedes was on the inside of the mirror just paying attention to the testing. I think the biggest struggle for us is the not knowing part, right? This woman's telling us that we don't want to get a diagnosis of autism yet because we don't want that stamped on her record. And
But then again, it could help with insurance.
Right. We got to figure out the insurance piece because we have Florida insurance, and now we got to work at. We're not sure that we can travel. There's just so much that we have to figure out. They're telling us that we're going to be here at least a possible 6 months and maybe even longer than that, but we won't know until 6 months of therapy.
And
so
we don't even know when the therapy starts. We could be on a 6-month waiting list so that we could, everything is up in the air, and we have to find comfort in the uncertainty and take it day by day and minute by minute.
And we will adjust to this. We will come up with a new plan. It's right now that we don't know what to do.
And like Yosemite at the time, it was like a really big problem, and it turned into an amazing blessing. So we have to trust that our plans and designs
are not as good as God's plans and designs, and we trust that the prayers and all of this is going to work out just the way that it's supposed to, and that we will eventually be able to RV. And if we can't, then we won't. We will have to sell the RV. We will have to go back into a sticks and bricks. We have not done a live call in a long time. One of the blessings of telling the RV Odd Squad right before Christmas why we were down here and the help that we were getting Sage and the fear that she may have autism was the people that reached out, the love, the emails, the stuff that they just kind of gave us hope. They told us to watch this movie or read this book, and we love and appreciate that help. And so tonight we're going to be going live. We would love to hear what you guys have to tell us. You guys have given us so much more than we feel that we've given you in the past year. So we figured, why not? We'll go live and we'll see what you guys have to say. Maybe you guys will come up with some ideas that we can't come up with. Maybe some of you have children that have autism.
So we mentioned how last time we were stuck unexpectedly, it really turned out to be a blessing. In the next video, we're going to share about the birds in Yosemite. We're going to connect to a playlist that gives it chronologically as we were going through all of it, so you can see that whole experience. It was just such a journey, and we're really grateful for that in the end.